all I feel is a bigger and bigger spotlight of people that see what I'm doing. I'm like, oh God, if this thing goes sideways, I'm going to have to hide for a decade and grow a beard. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yes.
It's terrifying.
Hey, thanks for being here. My name is Leah. In this podcast, you'll get a different take on the world of founders, startups, and innovation. I was a broadcaster for 23 years, not a business exec, so it was a leap to go from TV to VC. But since I've been in this sector, I'm repeatedly amazed by the founders who put everything on the line and just start a company from nothing. Why would they do this? In this podcast, we'll find out. Joining me today is Erik Westblom, co-founder and CEO of Provision, a company that makes cloud software to easily capture and manage all food safety and quality data. Erik, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me, Leah.
This is so fun. I love this. So, with this podcast, we're just really digging into this founder mindset and what it's really like to be a founder. So let's go right back to the beginning. When did you first become interested in becoming an entrepreneur?
I think the real answer to the question is, probably a long time ago. Both my parents are entrepreneurial. So I think a bit of that is baked into you, and then you go through the, formal structure of university and everything else. You don't know. You just want to get a job and get paid, right? So did that for a decade, and it just didn't feel fulfilled. I couldn't even put my finger on it of what it was or whatever, but I just wanted to drive in and have the autonomy to create something for myself in and around a topic that I was interested in. Mm-hmm. So, maybe to build on that, it's like if you read or you hit YouTube and watch all these different things about entrepreneurs, successful or otherwise, everyone's like, follow your passion. I don't really believe in that, because if that was true, like, my passion would be just drinking and golfing, and that wouldn't work out, right? So, but I do believe there's a broader sort of spectrum there. Is take a run at a broad category that you're interested in, and the cream will rise to the top. So that was the thing for me that got Provision off the ground, is I really wanted to do something in food, and I just didn't see anything really remarkable in food happening anywhere in Western Canada, for sure. So kind of a noisy answer to what you're asking.
I hear you. How did you come up with the idea for Provision?
It was actually founded around the concept of wine fraud. So in my mid-20s, I got level 3 of the sommelier. I kind of went through that more as just a hobby, interest in wine, and started reading a whole bunch of different things, and kind of stumbled upon this global statistics. I don't want to say database, but you get the idea. And there's somewhere in the neighborhood of $10 to $20 billion of annual fraud. So that's people taking empty bottles and filling it with an inferior liquid and calling it something. That's, I think, the more common view of what that is, but actually more realistic. There are a lot of farmers within designated zones, especially in Europe, that are actually bottling product that isn't what they say it is. Wow. To sell it and manipulate different markets. So I spent some time in Europe, in France and Italy in 2017, kind of chasing that down, and quickly realized that the problem is it's at the ground level. So you're not going to be able to change that. It's sort of indoctrinated in the whole field. So that was 2017. I had captured a whole bunch of different data points on wine. That sort of trickled over into food. And I started looking at a handful of different things. At the time, so late 17, early 2018, blockchain was all the rage. That's all everybody was talking about. And food seemed to be getting a lot of traction as the applicable industry for blockchain, right? Food chain, the food supply chain, all this quoted stuff, leveraging the word chain.
Right.
So I stumbled upon a contest that Maersk was hosting, world's largest shipping company. They move 40% of the world's food by volume. I feel like I've told this story 100 times now. And they were looking for any entrepreneurs that had unique ideas on reducing food loss. I was in some sort of mood where I wanted to get my opinion out, and I started typing into this application on a Friday afternoon all of, I think, some very legitimate points, but then a bunch of my obnoxious opinion on how I think blockchain's complete bullshit and it wasn't going to solve anything that they were chasing. I didn't realize, but I'd applied with 24 hours left in a 6-month application window. And I got a call the following Wednesday at 4 a.m. from their venture capital team saying, hey, this was extraordinary. This is the most well thought out application of anybody. We want you to move to Denmark. So I'm like sitting there on the edge of the bed at 4 a.m. and I'm like, I don't even know who this is. I'm like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
And they're like, well, you applied to this thing. And I was like, yeah, I did. I don't really. Okay. So I went in that. Let me take a step back. I talked to my then wife, who was 8 months pregnant with our second daughter. And I said, like, look, this thing happened and I had already been researching it for a year. And she's like, well, you should go to this. You have to go. I was consulting to another small company in town called Vintry Technologies. They're still in town. Awesome guys. It was all traceability on steel. And at this point, 10, 11 years into my career, I had done enough oil and gas stuff that was sucking my soul dry. Like, I just wanted to die being in that industry. So I literally walked in that morning and quit. And I started looking for an Airbnb in Denmark for as long as I could. So Maersk ended up, I was one of 10 quote unquote companies. I had an incorporation number and a website that was blank. That was selected. I was the only one from the Americas. Everybody else was from Asia, Africa, or Europe. And they gave me 16,000 euro to cover all my expenses for 2 months. So that included flights and Airbnb. And so it didn't go very far.
Yeah.
So anyways, I quit my job and I moved to Europe like 4 weeks later. I moved. And anyways, lived in downtown Copenhagen for 2 months, working impossible hours. I would just go to their office, learn from all these mentors, everything about the food supply chain that you can fathom, from gun and human trafficking being stuffed in containers all the way through to the banana movement and every commodity you can think of. I spent 2 months doing that and everything would just stick to me like glue. Compared to 10 or 11 years in oil and gas, I still could care less how you put gas in your car. I just find food just captivating. I think it's so interesting. The stats stick to me. I find it glorious. I came out of that with a really, I think, profound and detailed thesis on what I wanted to create, and I moved back and then just started going after it from there.
And started going after it. Okay, so but we have to back up just a smidge. You just like walked out of your stable job and moved to Europe and just said, I'm going to do this. People don't do that. Like, that is kind of wild. How did you do that?
Well, I just did it. I think that's the answer. I know what you're looking for, and I don't know that there's a definitive answer. I think it was just being unhappy in a sector that didn't enthuse me, not feeling like maybe I'm doing something for society. I'm not driving any real outcome. I don't know.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you what the innate driver is of why I wanted to do it. Yeah. Very competitive. I always want to very, very strong leadership tendencies. I'm not saying I'm a good leader, but I've got very strong leadership tendencies. I kind of want to do my own thing and have autonomy in everything I've done my whole life.
Right.
So moving in that direction, I think that was something.
Yeah.
Also, if I were to ask you, like on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being high, what is your tolerance for risk?
Yeah, not very high.
You would say
like 4 or 5.
Oh yeah, mine's like 9.9.
Oh yeah.
Just constantly interested in the highly unlikely outcome. I'm very motivated by that, and I want to feel that self-driven motivation to make the improbable happen. If that doesn't sound too ridiculous,
It doesn't sound
know.
ridiculous.
I don't know, but yeah, that was it. I just thought, like, this is really risky. This is something that is completely different. And to be completely honest with you, and not to sound like a fanboy or any of these things, but I had watched Anthony Bourdain religiously.
Yes.
And so that guy at the age of 44 literally just turned his life on its head and just went and did, what we know now to be this crazy lifestyle.
Yeah.
But I literally just looked at that and I was like, man, that guy's like, at the time, he was 10 years older than me when he made the decision.
Right.
And I was like, that's one of many decisions. You could see people often talk about a big break in their life or some turning point, etc. And I was like, well, this is highly improbable that I was selected for this thing.
Yes.
I have to do that.
Yeah.
Right? I can't be scared to take a risk.
Mm-hmm.
And anyways, we could go on and on.
We could go on and on about that. Amazing. You told me in our pre-call that, it wasn't even just the first thing, that you actually had tried to start a couple of other companies and they didn't go so well.
Yeah, I think everyone knows this is really hard.
Yeah.
In my mid-20s, I want to think about like timelines here, but when the App Store on, the Apple App Store or iTunes or whatever really started to catch heat and people are just building everything.
Yeah.
I would just write down, I had, I think at one point, like 150 app ideas that you could create in a spreadsheet. And I tried to spin this up with a buddy who was a software developer. And then another software developer, and then another one. And the problem you have, the chicken and the egg, is that a lot of people just want to get paid.
Yeah. They
don't have that risk appetite. They don't want to invest the time up front for the risk reward at the end, if that's what you're driven by. So like that was up and running for a year and a half, like just stumbling miserably. So I learned all the like shitty admin stuff about getting a corporation moving at the lowest cost humanly possible without lawyers and stuff.
Yeah.
That didn't work. Then I did some stuff in fintech for a couple of years in my early 30s. Quite frankly, built something really, really cool with some guys in Vancouver. And there's a whole story there we could get into when we're not recorded, but it just didn't work out for various reasons.
But you see the pattern there. Like you would do these couple of things and, a lot of people would say, well, I guess this just isn't for me, being an entrepreneur. And that clearly was not the case for you. Why do you think that was?
I don't know, kind of the concept of alligator blood, right? Like,
what does
just
that mean?
Refuse to die. I don't know. It's an old, I think it's from poker. It's like an old adage or colloquialism. It's the short stack at the table, the guy that just will never die.
Yeah.
Just like continually kind of stays alive. And I've had that in the back of my mind for a long time. Somebody said it to me in my mid-20s in school and everything. They're just like, yeah, it's kind of the never say die attitude. And well, if it didn't work, then let's try it again and try to get something to work.
Right.
As opposed to, it didn't work, I'm a quitter.
Right.
And
right.
Frankly, I mean, if provision didn't work out, or if it does work out in some way, either some huge momentous thing or some average success or a failure, whatever it is, I will probably just try something else and try again. I don't know what the motivating factor is.
Right. You love being an entrepreneur.
Yeah, maybe. Or some people would say I just, like my best buddy, he's like, man, you just love stress. So I don't know what to tell you.
Do you love it, or maybe you feed off of it? Maybe you feed up. Maybe it drives you.
Maybe. Is it stress or is it motivation to create something? I don't know.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
You don't know. The one thing you did mention, which I thought was quite interesting, is autonomy. It's yours.
Yeah, you get to be in charge. You don't have to, well, I got a board of directors now, who are awesome, by the way. If you're listening to this, you guys are so great. They're great, and I've built an amazing board, but generally it's mine, and I get to drive the bus. I get to drive it to success, or I get to drive it into a wall to a certain extent. That's very motivating in the sense that you drive your own interests, your own influence on the direction. But then talk about motivation. You're responsible for people's livelihoods, employees, right?
What does that feel like? That's a lot to carry.
That's stressful. If you talk about stress, that's stressful, right? Because I don't even know if I've said this to anybody before. The first time we raised any real money is $1.5 million in a convertible. We had 3 weeks left on payroll. And only one other person, the co-founder of the business, Michael Gibbons, he knew because he could see the bank account. And I was like, yeah, just relax. Don't worry. I'll close it. And so then I got the first check, right? That gets you moving. And then when we raised money the next time, I think we had still 9 months of runway in the bank. But cash is flying out the door, right? When you're building these companies. And that's a huge motivator. Don't embarrass yourself. Better go get some cash.
Better go find some cash.
Yeah.
But just getting that cash is really, really hard. You're pitching, they're telling you no, you've got a terrible idea, this is not going to work.
Over and over from people that don't know what they don't know what they're talking about in the context of your idea. That's the thing that makes you bleed, right? That is painful.
Right.
So in the last round, we raised 4.75 US, really unique and aligned investors all across the board. And it sounds great when you put out the press release and everyone pats you on the back. And it's like, yeah, I got rejected 66 times before that, and here's the spreadsheet to prove it, right?
Right.
And now it's funny because in some sense, there are some of these companies that have come back and now they want in or they're interested in the next round, and that's cool.
Yeah.
But you're in any like form of innovation, and what we do, I wouldn't even say is terribly innovative. The approach we're taking is.
Yeah.
But in any form of innovation, you just get rejected because everyone's like, that's not a thing, that's not an idea, there's no market for this. They use a bunch of acronyms that they learned in school, like TAM, SAM, SOM, all these different things, right? Dr. Seuss book. But yeah, that's just my cynicism, because I think that a lot of entrepreneurs, like around town or beyond, you go and talk to them, I don't think they built a business model canvas or all these like hokey templates. You come up with an idea, you do some research, you know that it's a thing, and you go and try to make it work.
But how do you keep going? Like, how do you keep going when, on a Monday you've already pitched 3 times and they've all said you've lost your mind, there's nothing here, don't worry about it, and you have to go into your employees after that or the next day and, put a smile on your face and keep going?
I don't know. You can't quit, right? You can't just stop and quit, or you're a loser, if you want me to be frank. And you can't just like give up or get down on yourself because somebody said no, right? There's a zillion analogous parallels to that in life. It's a lot of those people that would quit. They probably enjoy a monotonous 40-hour week, and maybe work isn't that big of a motivator for them. Mm-hmm. In the entrepreneur's seat, or myself, I think that you are motivated it's a challenge. Mm-hmm. If you turn me down, well, okay, it's a challenge to go on to the next one, and you just tweak the pitch, and you're just constantly tweaking and trying to find alignment on who you're talking to. Yeah. And to be fair, I mean, a lot of those investors, it's probably good that you don't get them, because if they don't get the idea or they're not into it, they're not going to be helpful.
Right.
There are all sorts of investors, from individuals all the way to the great big private equity guys. They know what they know, and there's going to be alignment there. That's part of it, right?
Right.
I think my only 2 cents on this, while I've got a microphone and potentially someone listening, I think that a lot of entrepreneurs are intimidated by the process of raising money. Mm-hmm. So talking to a VC, right? They always have their, perceived they've got all their shit together and they know what they're doing and they know more than you. Venture capital is it's a 2-sided marketplace, right? In a sense, they're like bears. They're more scared of you than you are of them. They have to raise money on one side and they have to accurately deploy it. So they have twice as hard of a job, and they're coming in and interviewing you knowing nothing about your business in almost all cases. So you have the leverage in most cases. It took me a long time to realize that. And a lot of interviewing and pitching VCs that would have never given me money because they don't know anything and it's not their wheelhouse. Food isn't their thing.
Right.
So anyways, that's my 2 cents.
That's an interesting framework, though. It allows you to get yourself into the mindset, if you will, of where you can be a bit more resilient when it comes to these conversations.
Or maybe that's just self-delusion.
Could be, right? Yeah. But don't you think you have to be a little delusional to be an entrepreneur? I mean, don't you have to be a little left of center to get something like this done and keep going after it?
Yes, absolutely. I don't know what the word is. Is it delusions of grandeur? Is it psychopathy, or any other stream of words you could put on a piece of paper? I don't know.
One thing that you and I talked about that you said you really loved about being an entrepreneur as well was being creative, that you were able to be creative in your work all the time. All the time.
So, and I think there's twofold. So being creative, and I really like the idea of building an international company or having international exposure. Mm-hmm. there are a lot of great businesses that grow something significant in Canada or in the US. One thing that really resonates and super interesting about food is it is completely global.
Yep.
And you get all these unique elements of different products come from different places. How do you recognize that? So through all of that, that creativity then blends with the international exposure, right? The world is actually very, very small. I'll have certain conversations, and my wife, Kelly, she'll be like, oh man, it's crazy you're talking to somebody in Mexico today and you're talking to somebody in Germany the day before. It's like, look, we don't do business there. We have a partner in Mexico, but no, we're not doing business. We still get to like turn over all these stones, and that's the creative element. You get to figure out what people are doing in other regions globally to either compare or complement your business. And you get to look at the 1, 2, 3, 5, 10-year plan of how you navigate all those things.
Yeah.
I kind of dare you to find me a full-time job at any company in town where you actually get to do that type of thing without being a CEO where you climbed all the way to the top and you probably just go to mostly board meetings all day.
Right.
So, yeah.
Let's go back to the conversation about the payroll. I remember when you and I did our pre-call, you told me that you still check the payroll constantly, several times a day, numerous times every week. What's that about?
Yeah, maybe that's neuroticism, but and it doesn't help that this SVB thing happened.
Yeah,
because that just
for sure.
throws anxiety in everybody's back pocket. But I still check the bank account every single day to make sure that the money is still there, right? And I've heard other people do this as well.
Mm-hmm.
I constantly, so I'm a math guy in high school. I think I barely passed English, right? Reading and writing was a necessity at best. Good at math, bad at English. And so therefore, I'm just like always adding and removing and adding things and removing things from the cash flow. And in my head is, how much does this cost? What's it going to do to the burn rate? What's it going to do to the runway? Oh man, is the cash still in the bank account? And for sure, part of that's anxiety, but that anxiety is driven by everything that you have to do to run the business. And thinking back, it's been like that since day one. So when I came back from Europe, I found a couple co-founders. Like at that time, I was like working the idea
right
in my network, and a couple of guys were interested. Well, one of them, the less risky of the two, wanted to be paid a salary, right? So the CTO at the time, $120,000 a year. He's super interested. I started the business with $38,715 that was residual from a rental property that I hadn't sold. That's in the bank account. And I was like, yeah, no problem. Sign an employment contract with them. Like, oh yeah, we're good as gold. Yeah, sure. And I just started paying them out of my own bank account.
Wow.
And when you see you get 24 pay periods in a year, divide that by a whole bunch. What is that, about $5,000? And then you add on EI and CPP and all these additional things that Uncle Trudy takes from you. And pretty soon the money starts disappearing really quick. So then I'm just like, oh man, how do I get a grant to offset that? And then how do I get a check from somebody to offset that? And it was just, it was just wild stress. But I mean, that's probably what's fueled my, then checking $30,000 in the bank account to now checking $3+ million in the bank account to make sure it's still there.
Isn't that amazing?
It's not amazing. It's terrifying.
It is terrifying. This is what I'm always saying. Like, why would you do this? That sounds absolutely terrifying to me.
It sounds motivating instead of getting up and doing the same thing every day.
Right. You're faced with the alternative. No thanks.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Okay, we talk about being a founder and the mindset that is required in this, but this is actually something that you are deeply passionate about. You told me that you're actually writing a book about this.
I wouldn't. Oh, no. That's unfair. I'm not writing a book on this.
A manifesto? A memoir? What is it?
I've started writing down ideas of things that you could put into a book or just kind of things to talk about around early stage companies, which is sort of the antidote to all of this crappy, repetitive, and I sound so cynical here, but the really repetitive business books that are out there, right? Everyone talks about the lean startup, and then the next thing, there's like 10 different books. Everyone's like, yeah, read that book and you'll know everything about starting a company. And it's like, yeah, but those are all reference to Facebook and Snapchat and the Mark Blackwells of the world. Mark, you're an awesome guy. You're really, really awesome. But that's improbable what happened. So
Okay, so what do you want people to know then?
I just think that there are a lot of challenges and there's a lot of road rash to starting a company. And just because you start an early stage tech company, it doesn't mean you're going to be a unicorn. They're called unicorns for a reason. So there's a whole bunch of challenging things along the way that you never think of. Like, you're talking about payroll. Well, that's half of it. How about employing the first few people and the risk appetite you have to get the first few people? That's a much different personality than the people you hire when you're 25 people or 50 or 100 or whatever. And then you could talk about venture capital. We can go on, and everyone's like, oh, you raised a VC round of some sort of millions of dollars. And at the end always sounds really easy. And it's really just an exercise in self-abuse and torture where you get rejected 66 times to raise money, right? The outcome sounds glamorous. And of course, there's some really great, awesome companies that have no problem raising money because they get some really great early traction. But that is not that common. So I don't know, I can't give away the secret sauce here if I'm going to try to build a suite of chapters and get you to write it for me.
Yeah, well, right? That's just it. I'm the writer person. I can do the word part.
Yeah, remember, I barely know English. So.
That's right. Yeah. But clearly you've got the passion there and it drives you, it motivates you every day. But, the other thing that I wanted to talk about, if you're willing, is the impact even on your personal life. Because I know that, when you're dealing with that kind of stress and you've got to jump at, things that might seem really, really risky, what impact does that have on your personal life, the people around you?
It's a lot. And I've heard a few other people in town and beyond talk about this So I went to Denmark, and this was at, full credit to her, my now ex-wife, very supportive at the beginning. It was awesome. But then I was working, and this isn't hyperbole, 16 to 18 hours a day after I got back. Wow. And we have 2 young daughters. They're phenomenal. And that kind of ran its course in less than a year. And we got divorced. And I am aware of the strain that put on it, right? And fast forward now, I'm remarried. I've got 2 children with my wife now, so I have 4 kids. So I'm managing that, and I can feel the stress that it puts on them. And you could talk to a lot of people about this. My phone is always on me, and I'm always looking at my phone all the time. And I try very hard to ditch it and lay it down, but it's very hard when there are people internally and externally that need to get a hold of you legitimately. And if you let that stuff build up, then it becomes insurmountable to catch up.
Right.
So you want to be on top of it, and you want to be available, and at the same time you want to be available to your friends, family, whatever.
Right.
Last year, I just think about the business development exercise of trying to be, founder-led sales and opening different markets in the U.S. and so on. We're trying to sell our product into the U.S. because Canada is so small. Mm-hmm. And I think I got somewhere between 50 and 60,000 miles and 75 hotel nights last year. So there's that travel burden.
Sure.
A lot of conversations with my kids through video calls and whatever else, which all the stories you hear of entrepreneurs, there's a lot of commonality, but I think that type of thing gets overlooked, right?
It does.
And yeah, it's stressful.
Yeah.
And it's a lot, and it grates on you after a while. And the people around you, right? Like friends that I used to be a lot closer to, I'm just like, oh, hey, how are you doing? I'm like, yeah, I haven't seen you in 4 months. So
yeah,
it builds up.
It builds up. So then how do you move forward, keep moving forward? Have you learned from what's happened in the past, and are you making some different choices now?
Yeah, and it helps that the company is a little bit bigger. Mm-hmm. So now you can delegate some travel, some accounts, some of the work, that type of thing.
Yeah.
You definitely look back at all the granular stuff you did that could be skipped if you were to start it all over. You're always going to learn that. There's always efficiencies. I think the other thing too is there's a book called The Hard Thing About Hard Things. Very, very good read if you want to, dive into the whole world of startups and the grind. But The number one kind of takeaway or anecdote from that was nobody fucking cares how hard it is. Nobody wants to hear you complain, but at the same time, it's like, cool idea, Leah. That's an awesome company you have. Don't bring it out and tell me all about it. And I think that I was probably brutal for that for the first 3 years, if maybe even now still, I don't know. My friends are just like, don't give a shit about the statistics of apples, man. Like, great, I'm glad you're into that, but that I don't care about people faking chocolate in Peru. Like, stop. Yeah, and you get really embedded in it and you kind of push it on people around you without noticing.
Right.
That's one big thing, right? Try to maintain your relationships as they are.
Yeah, and keep that support network there because you know you're going to need them.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Yep. Our managing partner, James Lockery, talks about that a lot. Let's talk about rejection. That's a huge part of being a founder. You get rejected over and over and over again, whether it's rejecting the idea or the pitch or whatever the case may be. What are your thoughts on that?
Just keep going. Put your head down and keep going, because at first your company's too young. No one wants to buy your product because they don't know if you've got, continuity or longevity there. And then your company gets a little bit, further down the road, right? We're 5 years old now. And 5 years into it, then everyone's like, oh, yeah, I see you guys have been around, but now, we're not too sure if we want to buy your software because you're going to get bought and then we're just going to get left on the side of the road. I'm like, holy man, like, where's the middle ground here?
Yeah.
So you get rejected by clients trying to sell or prospects. Then you get rejected by trying to hire people, right? And people just turn you down. You're not paying enough money, or it's not what they want to do, or people want to work from a bar on 17th Ave and they need all this like flexible work environments. You've got the people challenges. And then, of course, raising money. I mean, we beat that horse to death, but that's probably the most rejection. And I don't know what motivates me other than being competitive.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think you'd have to be very competitive to keep going.
Maybe.
Maybe.
It's something. I think everyone's got a different drive, right?
Absolutely. The one thing you also talked about was shame. Like, you just don't want the shame of like, oh, I completely messed this up. You're going to do everything you can to avoid that.
Yeah. And listen, I'm super grateful for the people who have listened to me, the people who have invested in Provision, the network that I've built in town, in North America, even in Europe now. Like, super grateful for all of that. But all I feel is a bigger and bigger spotlight of people that see what I'm doing. I'm like, oh God, if this thing goes sideways, I'm going to have to hide for a decade and grow a beard. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yes.
It's terrifying. That
Terrifying.
shame is the biggest motivator. You don't want to waste people's money. Yeah. We're hyper conscious of spend on absolutely everything. And I'm sure then that inherently has an impact on morale in the office. People are like, oh my God, why did you fire the cleaners? I'm like, because they're $400 a month. We could spend that on not that. Right?
Yes.
So there's all these different things, and it's your reputation on the line.
Absolutely.
Right?
But again, that is risky. Like, they're like, why would you do this? I don't know, man. It's something else.
Yeah, I don't know.
I love it.
So I could say that I would retire when I'm 45, and then I won't retire, and I'll do it again.
And you'll do it again and again. Yeah, because you love it. Because you love it. Let's talk about impact. You and I have talked about this before, but as you know, Thin Air Labs, it's very important to us to create meaningful human impact. How do you think of impact when it comes to Provision?
So you and I have talked about this before this conversation. Impact in the context of what we're doing, I think there's a level of realism to what we can do. First of all, the food supply chain and what is going on in the world now, kind of even before COVID hit, and then the impact on the supply chain that COVID had, and then what we've learned in 5 years as a business around the topic of food safety or compliance, regulatory, everything that goes in that quality. In the supply chain, I think people are familiar with the topic of recalls. Mm-hmm. Everybody just assumes there's a piece of software that is solving that problem. Not true. It's like a 95 to 97% rate of paper usage for tracking all these food safety records. And then once you have the records, assuming you have them and they're correct and they're not faked and people didn't just like pencil whip it, To execute a recall, then you go and flip through binders and paper, and you're just like, where did we send this lot or that lot, etc. The stat today is like 88% of all product in a recall has already been consumed. Oh. Never mind that it's sitting at a retailer or whatever.
Yikes.
So if you talk about impact, there's the short term, right? Let's create efficiency. Let's drive a better margin outcome for these food companies. That's great. Those are real value props for the company that we could dive into. But in the long run, what we additionally kind of uncovered is you capture 3 times more data points with food safety and quality records than you will through like an ERP or inventory system. So it doesn't matter if you buy flour and eggs and butter and chocolate chips or whatever for your chocolate chip cookie company, and you produce 20 crates of chocolate chip cookies. The individual grains of sand that go into all the food safety records that surround that, and I think this is where accidentally on purpose I started to get really into this. The topic of food safety sounds boring until you get into that. So if you look at equipment maintenance, if you look at sanitation, pest control, shipping, receiving, packaging, production records, storage records, facility maintenance around lighting, like all these different things that people take for granted in the world of food. I often joke, I think people just, I grew up on a farm, so I always had this inherent understanding of what I thought the food supply chain was. I didn't know there's so many nodes in the middle. But I think most people, if you ask them where does food come from, they'd say the grocery store. And all of the risk points that could make you sick along the way contribute to what we're trying to alleviate. So that's what I would say is like the tactical or the micro level of what we're trying to solve. But then when you look at that accumulation of data that has never been captured, analyzed, or exercised before, now you can get into things that are really interesting. How, based on these processes and procedures, how do we mitigate food loss, right? There's always going to be throwaway to what you're handling, whether it's apples or you're making cookies at Leah's factory.
Right.
So it's kind of step one. Well, now you have volumetrics on the products that are moving and what's selling in different jurisdictions based on those underlying attributes. So now you can start to understand, and listen, this is going to be a ridiculous example, but does a higher acidity apple sell better in Western Canada or Eastern Canada? Does a higher sugar score or brick score tomato sell for a higher price here or there? And you can get all of this information from all of these records that are on paper. It's never been done before. So we're starting to dig into that. So now if you have that kind of like mid-weight information, now you can start looking at the macro, right, which is the economic landscape of volumetrics on loss, movement, et cetera, decisions being made by companies in this region versus the other region. This is the big hairy ass goal, right? This is the thing that VCs are just like, yeah, whatever, man. This is what we're looking at. This is the driver. This is the unique motivating factor. And I think what's really cool, we've been talking to some really large companies recently, like big companies, about their views on this. And it's starting to come to life out of COVID. So 2 major world events have happened, right? COVID just really fucked up the supply chain because people are idiots, me included. COVID hits, the first thing that everybody does. If I asked you, what was the first thing to disappear at the grocery store, you would say
toilet paper.
Toilet paper.
Yeah.
Before that, the lemons and limes were long gone because everybody's first reaction, let's have a party. So they go and get lemons and limes for cocktails. And then they're like, what do you need for a party? You need steak and bacon and all these things you can barbecue because now we're going to be home. I'm going to cook for myself. We're going to have a great meal. And then they're like, oh yeah, all right, so this thing's going on. Better buy toilet paper. Then the pragmatism hits. And then the next thing after it lasts a few weeks is everyone goes and buys flour because they're like, oh
That's
God,
right,
it's the apocalypse. I better make my own bread. And so on and so forth, which the funnier thing, the whole time, you still have canned beans and lentils and all these things that'll actually keep you alive, untouched the whole time, right? Human nature. So that's one major thing, right? So now the world, the CFIA, the FDA, all these different governing bodies start looking like, hey, we really got to fix this food safety problem because you can track volumetrics. We'll force people to digitize all their records by the end of 2025. Then you share that with the FDA, we'll know where the problems are.
Right.
So Actually, I was going to share something, but I can't. I think that's confidential.
Yes, please don't do that.
Yeah. So then the other major event was the conflict between Russia and the Ukraine. I've said this on another podcast before, so I mean, definitely not my information, but there was a piece in The Economist on the impact around replacement commodities and the challenges in the supply chain. So I think the Ukraine is number 4 in the world for wheat production. I could be wrong. Don't stat grab me on that. But Egypt as a country consumes 36% of their calories in bread. They import almost all of their wheat from the Ukraine. So with that supply chain cut off and all the 2-year stores of wheat in the Ukraine basically disappearing, Egypt now has to look to different markets to pull in their wheat. China and India have closed their borders to exporting their product. They're the number 1 and number 2 wheat producers on earth. So now Egypt is going to not only have to find a source for wheat for that bread, they're going to have to look for replacement products. So if we really look long term, groceries haven't even started going up, because if people are replacing wheat consumption for flour, they're going to have to find something else. It's just inherently going to drive up the product value on different things everywhere. And then you've got population increase and all these other things. So inherently, the underpinning of provision is like, it doesn't matter what you eat, you're going to want to make sure that it's safe, because maybe you've never eaten lentils before, or you've never eaten this other thing. It starts to create a drive upwards in price, but then uncertainty just in consumption patterns and all of this stuff. So listen, I'm talking very micro on one hand and then very macro on another, but there's a huge sliding scale here that is going to force digitization and demand for this data, which is inclusive of sustainability. Because if I'm not buying wheat from countries I thought I was, now where am I buying it from?
Right.
What are the sustainability metrics? Where else do you get sustainability metrics from but on the food safety and quality records? So we're like full circle. We've really, really thought in depth about what we can capture in the next 5 years to help grow the business around where we think the market is going. And it's going to be these macro levers and decisions that are made in world events that I can't solve, or quite frankly, I don't even know anything about.
Right.
But the outcomes of those situations drive decisions. So I mean, back to my disdain for oil and gas. Everyone's like, oh man, we got to put gas in the car. And I'm like, well, you could turn all the power off and sit around a campfire and you still need to eat. So That's far more interesting.
It's far more interesting and necessary. Wow, incredible. Okay, we're almost out of time. So let's talk a little bit about, finally, if you've got founders listening to this podcast, what do you want them to understand about being a founder?
It's really awesome and it's really stressful. Make sure you're doing something that you're interested in, and again, not the passion topic, but a broad spectrum, right? Like I've talked to Vincent at Stellar Algo. I'm guessing he's interested in sports, right? Awesome. Do that, right? That's a really broad slice, but do that. If you're really interested in cars, do something in automotive. If you're interested in oil and gas, do something in energy. Like these broad swaths, don't come and have a hyper-specific idea on what you're going to do, because that's probably not going to work. Yeah. Right? So I think that's the thing, is do what you know.
And love, yeah.
And do what sticks to you, right? And if you don't know what sticks to you, ask your friends. They're going to be like, yeah, you're always talking about this, right? They'll tell you right away.
They'll tell you right away. I love it. What do you want investors to know about the founders in this market?
In this market or in Provision?
I'm going to say in Provision first, but then in Calgary and in Alberta. There's a lot of cool founders here.
So in Provision, I think that get your wallet out, because we're going to raise money at the end of the year, and we love money. No, but I mean, Provision, jokes aside, we're all extremely dedicated and interested in the idea. You can't really work at Provision without being fundamentally driven by the problem we're solving.
Right.
I think that's a lot of it. If I look at Calgary, Calgary's small. There is there's a subset, which I think is almost there's almost two factions within the industry. There's the rough and tumble sort of startup people, and then there's the Solium Mafia. And the Solium crew is awesome, right? They're investors in us. Brian Craig is on our board. I've got mentors galore. That is an amazing ecosystem that is heavily driven by a whole bunch of values that were just absolutely mind-blowing to how they built that company. And then on the other side, you've got this very rough and tumble, like pure startup, iterate, fail, like go through all that grind. That's where I'd put James, right? Because James, despite his success, just like came right back down to the ground floor, and he's putting his money where his mouth is, and he's helping people like me, like a bunch of other startups, and he's taking bets to actually help them. I would say the same for, the Mark Blackwells of the world.
Sure.
Is Mark's had some success and you would never know it. And it's that type of ecosystem which is really, really amazing, very open. It can be intimidating to talk to or meet some of these individuals, but they're awesome, right? Yeah. Like Alice Reimer, I think, is going to be on this. Alice is intimidating until you talk to her, and then she's awesome. She's just Alice, right? And you could go down the list of a whole bunch of other people in town. They're all super open. I think that we've got an informal kind of supportive ecosystem. This office is a great example. You can come in here and shoot the shit with whoever.
Yeah.
And then the other side of the coin is something like CDL. I mean, we went through CDL, and it's exceptional. And you've got like heavyweight titans in that room, right?
Yep.
People who have done a lot of things and have corporate success, monetary success, whatever it is. But they'll talk to you and they'll shoot the shit, right? Like, I just think there's... The other thing is there are a lot of people cut from different cloths. So one of our individual investors, I would consider him, both friend and mentor, Keith Brown. This is the type of individual that if you're looking kind of like starting a company, get yourself a Keith Brown. Like, hey, listen, leave my Keith Brown alone. I hang out with that guy, and I like it, and he's like a driving, motivating factor for me. And tremendous kind of informal advice on the mentorship side. Get somebody like that you have a common personality alignment with. And I'm not saying you have to hang out with them every single day. Maybe it's every 3 months. But that mentorship angle, to bring that full circle, I think those people exist in town. People are genuinely trying to help you and help others. And people like the story of watching somebody else take the risk, right?
They do, because that's terrifying.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay, finally, how do you hope Provision's story goes?
I hope on one hand that we're providing a solution for clients, that, we're doing what we say we're doing. We're actually helping. Second is I really genuinely believe, or I want people that work at Provision to have a good time. And that sounds really generic, but it's like if you only have, if you spend a third of your life working or whatever during a given day, I hope you can like at least have some fun and come and hang out, and it's not like a complete sweatshop. Yeah, we got to do a lot of stuff and work some long hours, and it comes and goes, right? The ups and downs are wild. But at least hang out with people that are awesome and remember it as a good time. Like, I think that's an outcome that I would really like. And again, whether you fail or you're super successful, it's just like, did you have a good time while you were there? Because me, like everybody else, probably worked at a place that was really shitty. For what it's worth, when I was 18, I worked in the warehouse at the Brick, like the furniture store. Yeah. And it was so fucking awesome. I was there for a year, and there's just this epic culture of like-minded people, and we were carrying furniture around. It was boring and monotonous.
But you loved it.
But it was awesome because of the people and everything was there. And somehow there was just there was a vibe, and there was a whole thing going on with just culture, and you can't replicate that. You can go to all these CDL sessions and you can read all the books you want. You can't replicate that. Yeah. So I hope that we have some glimmer of that somewhere along the way, or somebody remembered something.
Having a good time at Provision.
Yeah.
Erik, thank you for this.
Yeah, thank you.
The Global competition for talent requires proactive solutions. Whether it's growing and retaining our tech-skilled workforce through investments into local companies or companies looking to establish a presence in Calgary, or expansion of work-integrated learning and training for the digital economy, the Opportunity Calgary Investment Fund is helping to meet Calgary's growing demand for tech talent. Find out how OSIF is funding our future at opportunitycalgary.com.